My program involved a lot of experiential learning. So instead of being in a classroom, we would be at different sites, different museums, learning in that way.
With a large majority of my classes, about once a week or so, we would actually go on some sort of field trip or field visit where we would take that day's curriculum and explore it in the context of Copenhagen.
There were also a lot of open discussion times in the classroom. In my main core course, Comparative Healthcare Systems, there would be classes where we were split into different groups and given a debate topic and stance, and we would have to research, present, and counter-argue whether or not, for example, healthcare checkups are good. I definitely had to adjust to being given such little guidelines for work.
My classes in Bilbao were a lot less focused on readings and turning in assignments and deadlines, and they focused more on understanding the material, grasping the concepts, and more importantly, engaging with each other as a community and as a group. And they let me focus a lot more on improving my language skills, which I really, really appreciated and definitely took advantage of. Common cultural stereotype about Spain is that everyone has the siesta in the afternoon, so they take this long nap after they have a really big lunch and they sleep for the afternoon. That is not really the case. It's true to a certain extent, but not everywhere in Spain. So in Bilbao, stores did close in the afternoon for a few hours to give people time to go home and have lunch with their families and rest, but that's certainly not the case everywhere in Spain. So in major cities, the stores won't close for as long, or not as many people will take advantage of that and go home for lunch.
One Italian norm I was really surprised to discover is that pretty much all of the businesses close from like 12 to 2 during the weekdays. Italians really like to do like a big lunch and then, sometimes take a nap after, or just like take some time to relax. That's super common, especially among like smaller family-owned businesses.
A cultural experience that I had where something got a little bit lost in translation is actually a funny story from my first time going to the grocery store in Denmark. And essentially some differences between the grocery stores there and the grocery stores here are that you don't really buy things in bulk there. More so, you kind of go to the grocery store each day and really only buy what you need for that day or maybe the next day. But yeah, you don't really buy things in bulk. And also the cashier isn't the one to bag your groceries. You're actually supposed to bag them yourself. So on my first visit to the grocery store, I did not realize either of these things. So I buy a lot of food. I'm checking them out. The cashier is scanning all the items. I, of course, do not have any bags because I didn't realize that I was supposed to be bagging them. There's a big line of people behind me. Pretty soon I realized that the cashier is not bagging the items. So I'm trying to like scramble and hold them all in my arms. And eventually the cashier takes pity on me and tells me that I can just take the whole cart with me home as long as I promise to bring it back. There are definitely a number of stereotypes that are attached to Americans, and a lot of those stereotypes are unfortunately there for a reason and are proven true by a lot of American tourists. For me, one thing that I tried to do was really just stay cognizant of those stereotypes that exist and try to recognize when my behavior or my actions might be supporting those stereotypes.
I think at Northwestern, most people tend to assume I'm Asian American just because of my looks, mannerisms, and fashion choices. In Europe, however, people don't know that I'm American until I open my mouth. Thankfully, no one was ever really mean or outright violent to me, but I did face a lot of ignorance and occasional offensive act. I try not to let it affect me, but I definitely did make some mental notes of it, yeah.
The only way I think locals labeled me or identified me differently is as American or as foreign. And that didn't really affect me in a negative way. I mean, it reminded me that I wasn't in the United States, that I wasn't at home. But I kind of used that as an opportunity to learn the language, engage with a culture different from my own, and kind of embrace that identity as a foreign student.
One thing that I wish I had done before I left for abroad was definitely make a more thorough budget. Just being abroad in general invites a lot of expenses that you might not anticipate. So I definitely wish I would have, like I said, made a more thorough budget and really stuck with it.
The study abroad mentality I had of knowing that the time I had abroad was limited made me pull out my credit card more often than I probably should have. So even though I'm normally pretty thrifty with my money, I knew in advance I would be spending money on delicious food before going. I still surprised myself. So yeah.
One touristy thing I would not recommend doing is don't go to any restaurants or cafes that are like right outside of the big sites, like the Pantheon, the Colosseum. Instead, I recommend kind of venturing off to get away from the touristy areas, because the food, the cafes there are going to be first higher quality, and second, they're going to be less expensive.
Also definitely would recommend not necessarily discounting something just because it's known as kind of like a more touristy spot. I know that I still had a lot of fun checking out some places that were more touristy, and I know I would have regretted having left and not seen some of those better known landmarks.